Let's look at our next economic lesson called deregulation. Our goal for this lesson is to explain the positive and negative benefits of deregulation on the economy. Look at your vocabulary words. The dropping or relaxing of restrictions and limits is deregulation. Central points of business is a hub. A huge union of large corporations or utilities is a mega merger. Guidelines for controlling costs and expenditures by the consumer is price setting standard. Those that are in support of something are proponents. Realigning or adjusting to meet new qualifications or needs is restructuring. Work done for others is service. Anti-Monopoly Act awarded victims of a monopoly 3 times the amount his business lost is the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. And growth through successful scientific research and strength is technological advance. On January 1st, 1998, consumers in California had an opportunity that they had never enjoyed before in the history of the state. Up to that date, the electric utility industry had operated as a monopoly, with a single utility company providing the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity to its customers throughout the state. It owned the market. After January, however, customers of deregulated investor-owned industries, IOUs, were given a range of choices as to the generation portion of their electric services. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in our notes, go ahead and put your dates. We're going to talk about deregulation. Just can't hardly see that. Okay, deregulation gives customers a choice. California was the first state to undertake the restructuring of the electric utility industry on a statewide basis. The customers, instead of being forced to pay the one price that a utility would force them to pay, now had their choice between Pacific Gas and Electric, San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and 4 other utilities throughout the state. This type of restructuring is known as deregulation. The government takes its hands off of holding strict monopoly-like guidelines and allows many companies to enter into the competitive market. Allows many companies to enter in to the competitive market. Sometimes regulation has been necessary. On one hand, it's not always bad for the government to have a tight control. Sometimes it is important that the organizing and operation of certain businesses are under governmental regulation in order to ensure a competitive market in production and/or trade. For example, If there is only one phone company in all of America, what would you use to set the price of a 1-minute local phone call? Would it be 10 cents or $3? With nobody in competition, the price-setting standards run the danger of being abused. Monopolistic practices have been dealt with by the government in certain actions taken. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914 are two good examples of such regulation controls. Deregulation, however, opens up an important window of opportunity for the consumer. In deregulation, government loosens control and allows other companies to enter the market. Instead of the government becoming stricter, it becomes more lenient. Deregulation is about reducing rates, increasing supplies, and giving a better service to the public. Regulation is necessary. We'll put that in parentheses. Deregulation is when, I'm still talking about deregulation, that's why I put that in parentheses. The government gets more lenient. It's about reducing rates, increasing supplies, and better service. It creates a free market in which consumers can shop around for the lowest prices, whether for an airline ticket, a telephone, or electric service. The state or local government oversees the deregulation process and sees to its fairness and cooperation. The government may also keep the consumer aware of the process so the customer may best understand how the changes in regular business will affect them and allow them to make a more informed decision about what service to choose. So basically it gives the consumers choices. You can choose where you want to purchase certain items, where you want to get different services. Why deregulation? Why deregulate any business? Is it good for the customer? Okay, so the purpose of deregulation is to open the doors of competition to many businesses in order to offer consumers economic advantages. Okay, it opens competition and it gives consumers advantages. For example, the electric utility industry in Michigan opened up a competition in 1997 in order to offer consumers not only greater choice in purchasing energy services, but also to lower rates and to stimulate technological advances among the utilities through competition for Michigan customers. The state government voted to deregulate in the Detroit area in order to give the consumer more strength in their spending dollar. A lone utility company, Detroit Edison and Consumers Power, faced new competition as deregulation gave people a choice between utility companies. The company tried to battle the act by asking for funds to cover standard costs and lost income once the process was underway. But deregulation went through, much to the benefit of the customers. Does deregulation always work? There's a fine balance between outright competition and questionable cooperation, and the customer must be aware of the abuse of that fine line. For instance, a controversy brewed over the results of the Telecommunications Deregulation Act of 1996. A 1997 USA Today article was entitled, "Telecom Deal Signal Deregulation's Failure." The article told about many mega mergers occurring between local distance phone companies, local phone companies, television networks, and cable operators after the deregulation bill was passed. The intended competition was not as great as the powers in Washington thought it would be. In a 1984 move against the monopoly, AT&T was broken up into one long-distance phone company and 7 separate baby bells to provide local service. After passage of the 1996 deregulation law, though, the baby bells started merging with each other, and 2 of them attempted to re-merge with AT&T. The danger, critics said, was that the majority of America's long-distance calls and up to a fourth of local calls would be back under one company, and an unregulated company at that, creating a distinct danger of higher prices and poor quality service. Okay. So deregulation does not always work. Deregulation can be very beneficial if done wisely. When a careful approach to deregulation is taken, the results can be a great benefit to the public. A good example of this was in 1978 when the Airline Deregulation Act was put into effect. The federal economic control of the airline industry ceased, yet government control of safety standards stayed in place. After years of close watching, proponents of the airline deregulation could happily point out the facts that became evident to everyone. The plan was working. Fares dropped, remained lower than they were before deregulation. The number of passengers complaints continued to drop even with a higher number of passengers. As some airlines had to close their doors due to heavy competition, opponents of deregulation tried to convince people that things would get worse. Yet the industry has adapted, with some of the large airlines establishing hubs at certain cities where the passengers change planes. Some people thought the deregulation of airlines would bring about the end of safety practices and stable rates. However, the restructuring gave consumers great choices through competition and brought lower costs along with more efficient and reliable system. Okay. Okay, so deregulation doesn't always work. It talked about, remember we talked about AT&T was a monopoly. Okay, in 1884, it was broken up. Okay, it was broken up into one long distance company and 7 Baby Bell companies, which were local service. Okay. Then we had the 1996 deregulation law. So in 1996 we had the deregulation law. And then what happened was, I forgot to put the 7 here, there were 7 Baby Bell local companies. What happened was, the Baby Bells started merging. And it said that 2 tried to reemerge with AT&T. Tried to remerge with AT&T. Okay. So it doesn't always work, but it can be very beneficial if it's done wisely. So we said that deregulation doesn't always work. We talked about AT&T was ruled a monopoly, and in 1884 it was broken up into one long-distance company and 7 Baby Bell companies, which is a local service. They broke them up for competition, so AT&T wouldn't have that monopoly. Well, in 1996 they passed a deregulation law. The Baby Bell companies started merging, and I forgot my R in merging. And 2 of these Baby Bell companies tried to remerge with AT&T, which was the problem we had in the first place. So deregulation doesn't always work, but let's talk about when it's done wisely. Okay. We talked about it can be beneficial. Deregulation can be beneficial. Okay, now we're going to talk about in 1978. The Airline Deregulation Act. Okay, we had the Airline Deregulation Act. Okay, and let's see what happened. It said fares dropped. Fares dropped. Air travel doubled. Air fatalities dropped I know when you're talking about air travel, dropped probably isn't the best word. It says they were lower than they ever had been. Passenger complaints. Dropped. And it says even though they have a higher number of passengers, they have less complaints than they had before. And it said that some airlines did have to close down because of the competition. Some people thought that it would bring an end of safety practices, but what happened was it gave the consumers choices and competition, and it brought lower costs along with a more efficient and reliable system. So sometimes it does work. Go ahead and review your lesson. We said that deregulation can be beneficial. The 1978 Airline Deregulation Act, the fares dropped, air travel doubled, the air fatalities dropped, and the passenger complaints dropped. Go ahead and review your lesson, study your notes, and answer the questions.